From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
Orrin Hatch was a giant of the Senate and a veritable pillar in Utah. His influence, his hearty laugh, and powerful advice are missed by us here in the Senate and by millions in Utah.
Orrin Hatch believed that the people you love and the friends you have are the real currency in life.
He was promoting and helping women succeed way before it really became kind of a cause.
I think Senator Hatch would want his legacy to be that he loved this country and that he loved his God and that he was in the service of people.
Senator Orrin Hatch, a giant of the Senate, who served his country and the people for 4 decades in the United States Senate. He was the longest-serving Republican senator in U.S. history. Senator Hatch died a week ago Saturday at the age of 88. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Edition. I'm Doug Wright. You just heard several memories shared by some people who worked very closely with the late senator. Utah Senators Mitt Romney, Mike Lee, Hatch's former press secretary, Heather Barney, and of course the chair of the Orrin Hatch Foundation, Scott Anderson. And this morning, we want to welcome our very first guest on the program, our former governor of the great state of Utah, Gary Herbert, to talk about the impact that Senator Hatch had on the state. I have to tell you, Governor, when we were putting together the show and I thought, who do I want to talk to about Senator Hatch? Yours was at the top of the list. And I'm so grateful that you'd make an extra special effort to join us today on Sunday Edition.
Well, thank you, Doug. I appreciate the invitation. And let me just say amen to what's already been said about Senator Hatch. He was not only a giant in the Senate, he was a giant in the community. He was a giant in his family and a great example and mentor to many of us that have been elected officials and been part of the process of helping to represent Utah.
I was coming back from a trip to Amsterdam when I heard of Senator Hatch's passing, and it really hit me. Senator Hatch was very, very kind to me, to my family, at a very difficult time in our family. You know, he reached out to us for 2 Christmas Eves in a row. He called me just to make sure that our family was okay. This was 11, 12 years ago. And you never forget things like that and how kind and how generous. And even when you disagreed with Senator Hatch, he'd put his arm around you and go, oh, someday you'll come around, that type of a thing. Your legacy in the state of Utah is incredible. You know, at local government, as a county commissioner, and then lieutenant governor, and then governor. And by my calculations, you're the second longest serving governor of the state of Utah, second only to Calvin Rampton. You have seen a lot of things happen in our state under the time that Senator Hatch was serving us in the Senate.
You know, I've had the good fortune of knowing Senator Hatch since 1967. I was working as a Mormon missionary in Pittsburgh, and he was an up-and-coming attorney. He already had legions of followers and people that had great respect for him. He helped the missionary program, certainly was a strong advocate for the church in Pittsburgh. And this up-and-coming attorney that had been all the way to the Supreme Court on many different cases really had a bright future as an attorney. And so I was a little surprised, but pleasantly so, when he moved to Utah around 1969, 1970. Us missionaries were back home, and then a few years later, we get word he's going to run for the Senate.
Right.
He'd been in Utah for 6 years, and he solicited some of the missionaries to help him go door to door and knock on doors and pass out pamphlets. But again, a person I had just great admiration for, a bright guy, and the hardest working person I've ever been around. Certainly, he was known as a workhorse, not a show horse. We've got plenty of those in Washington, but he was a workaholic. And that's how he won his first race for Senate, because he was not the favorite. Yeah. He was kind of an outsider, and yet he outworked everybody and got the nomination and beat Frank Moss, who had been a 3-term senator, and the rest is history. I believe he kind of helped usher in the Reagan Revolution. Yeah. You know, he was kind of cutting edge on this conservative movement, and he was articulate, good-looking guy, and really did some wonderful things to help usher in this Reagan Revolution, which led to a generation of prosperity here in the country.
From your vantage point of serving local government, lieutenant governor, and especially as governor of the state of Utah, What is his imprint on our state? What will he be remembered for doing for and in Utah?
Well, there's been books written about Orrin Hatch. We could write a book on just that very topic. I first met Orrin in the political realm when I was the head of the Realtors Association for the state of Utah. And we were back there. He was always prepared. We'd have, 10 or 20 of us realtors there talking about issues. They had Realtor Day on the Hill in Washington, D.C. Going into Orrin Hatch's office, he was always welcoming, prepared, and busy. And so whatever the issues of the day are, he was on top of them. Appreciated the fact we were stopping by to talk with him about that. Then I became a county commissioner, and one of the issues that was a big near and dear to our hearts in local government, in particular rural Utah, was PILT payments, payments in lieu of taxes. We all know about the public land issue. We have less than 25% of our land mass in Utah is privately owned property. But for rural communities, the PILT payments were significant. Senator Hatch brought a committee here to Salt Lake City to have a hearing on PILT payments and have us tell him and his committee how important this PILT payment was, because we can't tax it. We don't get a property tax on it. We have to take care of all the management and maintenance and search and rescue. And so he was there saying, we need to make sure that the PILT payments are increased and that they're there every budget cycle to help local county government.
When you were serving as governor of the state of Utah and there was an issue that required attention from Washington, D.C., often we try to do things without the interference of Washington, but you cannot avoid it. Occasionally, you really need some heavy hitters on your side in Washington. What were some of the big issues?
Well, there's been a number of big issues. We talked about the public land issues, but one of the things that was near and dear to my heart was a balanced budget. How we spend profligate spending we see in Washington is not sustainable. And look at it today. Senator Hatch was known as Mr. Balanced Budget. Yeah. He came within one vote. He talks about getting a balanced budget amendment passed. And unfortunately, it didn't look where we'd be maybe today if that had passed. But he was fiscally prudent, fiscally responsible, and we need more of that today. We had opportunities to talk about a number of issues that impacted states. We railed against, as a county commission, for example, and then as governor, unfunded mandates. It's easy for the federal government to say, well, let's make the states or the local government do it. And no, we're not going to give them any money. They'll have to raise the tax themselves and pass the buck, so to speak, on to somebody else. And Orrin understood that and really was sympathetic and empathetic towards the challenge and worked with us very closely to make sure that Congress understood what they were doing and the end result, which was detrimental to local government.
At various points in the senator's career, depending on which party was in power, his clout in Washington, D.C. was legendary, either in key, like Judiciary Committee and so on. But boy, there for a while, President pro tempore of the Senate and fourth in line to the presidency. What kind of not just bragging rights, but power did that translate to the state? A
lot of people don't realize how much he did work behind the scenes. He was a very willing to work bipartisan across the aisle. His relationship with Ted Kennedy is legendary, but it's not just him, but others. And on the Judiciary Committee, he ended up helping shepherd people through the process. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, got confirmed 96-3.
Yeah.
I mean, so today we think, how did that happen? Well, it was not quite so bitterly partisan back in those days. But, he was put up, Judge Bork was nominated for the Supreme Court. A lot of people don't realize that the number 2 guy on that list was Orrin Hatch. Yeah. Anyway, it ended up being Judge Bork goes through the process. And I know Orrin said, I probably wouldn't like the confines. He was a little bit more outgoing. He would call a press conference if he was on the Supreme Court and explain right. Why he voted the way he did. But he had a lot of friends and colleagues that had a lot of respect. And when they had an issue, they would say, let's go see Senator Hatch and see what he says about it, see if we can get a coalition. And people forget about coalitions. That's bipartisan coalitions of how we can get things done. In many years, Orrin Hatch passed more legislation than some senators would do in their whole term.
Yeah. When you and I chatted on the phone the other day, you said, I absolutely need to mention his great wife and the support of her and his family. Boy, and I know with you how important Jeanette, was to your administration, your time in government. quickly about.
Well, the family is so important, and Orrin Hatch had a wonderful family, and he had a wonderful family because he had a great wife. Elaine was just suited to support him. He was a workaholic. He would leave early and stay late, and he was gone a lot. And a lot of the burden of raising the family and keeping them together and to keep the home fires burning fell upon Elaine. And she is just an angel. And I can tell you, Senator Hatch knew that. He always treated Elaine with great respect, great tenderness, and showing the love that he had for her. But when we talk about the greatness of Orrin Hatch, you need to talk about the greatness of Elaine Hatch and what she did to help Orrin become as good as he was.
Governor Herbert, I'm so grateful that you joined us on Sunday Edition when you were kind enough to turn my call and say yes. And I know you've made quite a bit of effort to be here today.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here to represent and pay tribute to a good friend and mentor of mine, Orrin Hatch, who has done a lot for this country and a lot for this state. We need more like him.
Governor Herbert with us here on Sunday Edition. And we will be right back. Tributes to the late Senator Orrin Hatch have continued to come in over the week since his passing. President Joe Biden, who served more than 3 decades in the U.S. Senate with Senator Hatch, praised his former colleague. In a statement, Biden said in part, "The greatest perk one has as a senator was the access to people with serious minds, a serious sense of purpose, and who cared about something, and that was Orrin. He was, quite simply, an American original." I'm delighted to welcome our former governor. When I think of how to introduce you, I always feel most comfortable with governor, but it can be secretary. And I so appreciate you joining us, especially on this occasion when we are honoring and remembering Senator Hatch. And you've had a unique vantage point, not only as governor of the state of Utah, but in your role as ambassador under 3 administrations. And you've been able to view the impact of Senator Hatch from vantage points that most of us could only dream of.
Well, first of all, condolences to the great Hatch family. You know, any state would dream of having a senator as effective as Orrin Hatch. Look at the diverse array of friends that he brought around him. Talk about a personality that really reached out beyond the traditional boundaries. Through him, I met Muhammad Ali. Through him, I met the lead singer of U2, a guy by the name of Bono.
There you go.
He brought them in not just because he had that kind of personality that drew people in, but he brought them in to introduce them to public policy and to legislation that they would buy onto and help support. So, yeah, he was a man of faith and freedom. Those are the 2 words that I think are the hallmarks of his legacy and his tradition. He believed in the American spirit. He believed in American ingenuity. He believed in rule of law. He was a lawyer. He was a musician. He was a writer. And he was a world-class legislator. And in the end, he broke the sound barrier in the United States Senate. Yeah. But the state, you know, I've gone around asking people for their own reflections on Orrin the last couple of days. And it's interesting, Doug, because everyone has their own story to tell. He'd been around for so long and he touched so many corners of this state, so many people in a very personal way, that people stop to think, and they always come up with a very unique, it isn't kind of a general set of statements, it's a very unique personalized story about Orrin. And, you know, I can reflect back after our family moved to the state in the 70s. I attended the convention in 1976 when he was running for the United States Senate. Two years away from his move here himself from Pittsburgh. Can you imagine that happening today?
Oh, yeah.
No name, no real reputation, but he had a sense of ethics and a way to articulate the values that were important to him. Ronald Reagan came through and endorsed him. Yeah. Ronald Reagan then ran and won in 1980, and of course the Senate flipped. And Orrin, with just a couple of short years in the Senate, became chairman of I think it was called the Health and Labor Committee back then. It's under a different name today. So you look at the different key committees that he's chaired: Judiciary, Intelligence, Health and Labor, Finance. which is critically important to the U.S. tax code and trade, of course.
That's right.
And so he's kind of done it all, but he all of his work was done with the thought that Utah came first, and the people here. And I think that always kept him connected to the grassroots.
You know, I mentioned earlier, I mentioned secretary, that was a misspeak, obviously ambassador, but ambassador.
I like John.
Yeah, John. But ambassador under Reagan, I think of ambassador under President Obama, ambassador under Donald Trump. It is remarkable. And when you were overseas, whether it was, you know, in Russia or whether it was in China or, and the other one was Singapore? No, Singapore. There we go. Got that one right finally. But when you were serving overseas, representing this great country, Senator Hatch had very powerful positions back in Washington, D.C., even to the point where he was fourth in line to the presidency of the United States. What kind of acknowledgement or impact did that have overseas?
Well, people overseas respect the United States because we have institutions that matter, institutions of integrity, institutions that work, that are driven by the people and tethered to our Constitution. And Orrin was always excellent at articulating why America worked well, why it was unique. We had our ups and downs, and of course we would make mistakes. And as Alexis de Tocqueville used to say, we're a great country not because we're full of great people, but because we're able to get up and repair our wounds. And it's because of our resilient system. Orrin Hatch was the very embodiment of our resilient system. And he carried it with him wherever he went. And people of great stature would come in and out of this state. They wouldn't just show up because they wanted to come to Utah. Many, many came here because Orrin invited them. Yeah. And so were the doors opened by Orrin? You bet. Did he have an impact culturally, religiously, economically, in all these categories? Orrin was a prime mover behind getting Utah on the map and always introducing people to the better aspects of who we are.
You mentioned with Senator Hatch, it was always Utah first. And obviously he loved the country, worked for the country, but Utah was always there on his horizon. I won't mention the name, but a very notable Utahn who was quite a philanthropist. His last name was not Huntsman in this case, it was someone else. But I remember he was talking with Senator Hatch about this wonderful thing that he'd done in Africa and this wonderful thing that, you know, and he wasn't bragging on himself, he was just talking about it. And Senator Hatch listened and he said, but what have you done for Utah lately? And you know, that individual went, he's right.
That was Orrin.
It was Utah.
It was totally Orrin. Yeah, totally Orrin. We have industries in this state that are alive and well and prospering today because Orrin took an interest in them, in protecting their intellectual property, in introducing them to foreign markets. I remember sitting before the Finance Committee during one Senate confirmation for a trade job that I had. And Orrin was the most important official around trade policy. People don't think about Orrin in terms of trade, yet he was the most important person in the Senate and therefore the United States when it came to trade policy. So it's really hard to quantify the impact and the value that Orrin brought to the people of this state, the people of the country, and generations behind him. I can say generations plural now because there are probably at least two who learned from, because he always used to take the time to sit down with young people. I was in many of those groups, and he always used to treat me until I was elected governor like I was just a young kid. Right. Every time I went through Senate confirmation, he always would show up and he'd say, "Let me handle it for you. Let me make sure I can keep anyone from attacking you." They always were great anyway, but he always took a moment with the younger generation to explain the finer parts of the American political tradition, and would mentor folks. And as a young intern in his first term in his office, many were the times when he would sit down with us. He didn't have to do that, and mentor and shape and mold our younger generation. And it had a profound impact in terms of the choices we made about service.
Senator Hatch always used to love to chat with almost anybody about his relationship with Ted Kennedy, which was legendary. And I can remember when Senator Kennedy passed away and Senator Hatch remembering him and some of their moments, which could be real tense at some times. but they also had the gift of working things out. Isn't that the sign of a statesman, when they can kind of put the differences aside? They can beat each other up maybe on the Senate floor during the day, but the next day they have a deal. It's
when you put the interests of your country ahead of personal interests, and Orrin was famous for that. And yes, he was a proud politician, and any politician blows smoke from time to time. Any politician overstays their welcome from time to time. But did he put country first, and did he put state first? That was the mark of Orrin the statesman, reaching across the aisle for purposes of not political theatrics, but moving the public policy agenda forward and actually getting big things done for the country. It's rare that we see that done at all these days, but Orrin was an exemplar of how that was done and how relationships were forged and how together things got done.
Jon Huntsman, I so appreciate you joining us. And by the way, he went to a great effort to be here today, as did our other guest. And I'm so grateful, and to have you, from your vantage point, remember Senator Hatch. It's been a joy to have you on the show. Thank you so very much.
What an honor.
Jon Huntsman with us on Sunday Edition. And we will be right back, so stay with us. Orrin Hatch was known as a titan of the United States Senate, but his life was so much fuller than his public service. He was a man of faith and a man who was devoted to his family and proud of his heritage. The Orrin G. Hatch Foundation has announced funeral plans for the late senator. Senator Hatch will lie in state in the Utah State Capitol Rotunda next Wednesday. Now, his funeral will then be held next Friday at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Institute of Religion in Salt Lake City. And both events will be open to the public. And you can, of course, find coverage of the senator's funeral here on KSL TV and on KSL digital platforms, as well as the KSL TV app. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Sunday Edition. And boy, a big thanks to our two former governors who spent time joining us on Sunday Edition and reminiscing about Senator Orrin Hatch. Music and the spoken word is coming up next, and we'll see you next week.